I like the like two cops are like sitting back and they're like, so this guy thinks this other guy's a god. You know, and then they're just fighting and he's like, so you fought him? You know?
Hello and welcome to StoryFellas, the podcast where we make stories and we break stories. I'm your host, Tommy Antonucci.
And I'm your host, Zach Lovelace.
Zach, how are you doing this fine morning? Wait, I forgot. I got to introduce the show, what we do. Guys, if you've not seen the show, go watch earlier ones. But this is a show where we improvise a movie/story idea in about an hour using scraps of ideas or randomly generated prompts. And at the end, we will have a title and a line and a movie outline for you. Zach, how are you doing this morning?
I'm so glad you did that because I was about to do it, but then
Zach was like, "What are we doing here?"
I don't even know why'd you wake me up so early? No, I'm well. I'm well. For those who have listened, I'm very nearly done with my documentary.
He says this every episode.
Well, progress is made in inches after a certain point, and I think we made a foot. You know, we really pushed.
Nice.
So we have a timing lock, but not an edit lock. And to differentiate those terms, a timing lock, there's nothing changing on screen in terms of the timing of everything, but there's like photo swaps, there's like captions that are getting swapped out, there's that kind of stuff, like garnish. And I'm actually today meeting with my composer, Stephen Malin, an amazing video game composer who also does film scores. And we're going to be cranking through some hot score for this documentary. And he's already done some stuff for it, and it's been great. So I'm just excited for it, man.
Nice.
How about you though, Santa Claus? Look at you with your red.
Yeah, I know. It's my Santa Claus hoodie. Guys, check out the YouTube if you're wanting to see the Santa Claus hoodie. I forgot I had this. I only wear it in the winter. It was like at the bottom of like a shelf somewhere, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's like the warmest hoodie I've got. I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. I don't know. I feel like constantly have some project ideas in my head, but too many in too little time.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I want to just like, without telling you, just like drop something. We always talk about that with our friends.
It's fun.
Just like not.
It's hard to do though when you're working with people. Like if you want to collaborate with somebody, you know, especially within our friend group.
Yep.
To just be like,
well, what you don't know, I've been collaborating with you, but I've been using the Men in Black like eraser thing every time we do. Okay. So you're gonna be like, wait, I'm in this project.
I love this idea. There's something about this that feels so, home.
Feels so close to home to me. But no, I've got some ideas, but life's also busy, and I don't know if I've talked about it on the show, but I think we're close enough at this point that I have my first child on the way, which is very exciting.
It is life-changing, man.
Yep. So trying to also be realistic and not like pick up too many projects while that's happening, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So StoryFellas and some other things are enough projects as it is, but I'm
excited
always want to fiddle with things.
I'm excited for the stories after your baby's here, just to see if it changes you.
Yeah, just we'll see if I'm just real grumpy because I'm so tired on the show.
Or it's just like, I think the character should be a dad. He should have a newborn.
Yeah, a dad with a newborn, and he gets a lot of sleep, and it's really great. And there's no trauma. There's no
conflict. There's no conflict here.
There's no conflict. It's just sleepy time goodness. Yeah. So yeah, that's what's going on with me. That usually that's filling up most of the time of just preparation for that.
Yeah, understandable. Very understandable, man.
Yeah.
Well, I today have brought us two scraps. So for those who are new to the show, sometimes we bring writerly scraps. And you know this, if you're a writer or a filmmaker of some kind, you write down an idea in your note, like in your notes app or something, and it's just kind of half-formed. It's those half-formed ideas that we usually bring. And we try and just, give them a little bit of... Give them legs. I think we say that a lot. We got to give it some legs. Yep. And so I'll start with this one. I was actually digging in my sketchbook yesterday, and I found a series of sketches of this one character that I really liked. So this is from about 10 years ago, The Uncanny Case of Detective Gumshoe. And he's just like made out of gum. I'm trying to get the camera to focus. There we go. Again, this is why you need to watch on YouTube, folks.
If I will describe it for those who are just listening, it's like a little picture he's drawn with like a big comic book title, and everything's pink and shiny, and it's basically a guy who looks like he's made out of chewing gum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and then like a closer up kind of thing. I was really playing with these markers. They're called Copic markers back in the day. They're like watercolor type thing. And this guy came out of the end of my pink marker one day.
Yeah,
Really,
I like it. He's cool. I do have the question: is his power that he's stretchy, or is he just made of gum?
I don't know. I don't know if I got that far. But he definitely, I think, is made of gum. Like whether it's like stretchy, you know, already chewed gum, or if it's like he's like Mr. Fantastic. You know, I don't know if he stretches that far. Here we go, some other sketches as well. And I purposely, I don't know if you can really tell if it's coming into focus here. There we go. So this guy made me think of you.
It's the same pink head bald gum man, but he's wearing a turtleneck and a like brown jacket, and I really like it. He looks like, I've said this before because I was at Thanksgiving and I wore a brown turtleneck and I wore like a brown bomber jacket.
Nice.
And that look of like a turtleneck and a jacket, I was like, I look like a Russian thug, like a background character for like,
or like a 70s, you know, detective or whatever. It's just like it has a good look to it.
Yeah.
And of course, I like this up here. It's kind of like a little bit of a Bruce Timm style there at the top, like a Dick Tracy kind of looking thing, which makes sense because Dick Tracy is a detective, and so is Gumshoe. And I had things written here. I have just some, it's not even like very good dialogue or anything, but he's like, sorry, babe, no can do. So he's got a little bit of an attitude, it looks like. Then I just have the words sticky situations written. So I was thinking maybe a TV pilot for Gumshoe. Could be kind of cool because then it's a little bit of a world building episode at that point. Like, you know, you're just setting things up. You're setting up the major bad guys, the major kind of thrust of the story. But yeah, that's Gumshoe. Again, the first picture is this one right here, which maybe I'll scan it and send it to you for a thumbnail.
Yeah, I'm saving those for thumbnails too, for like the little time codes.
Welcome to the back end of YouTube, folks, where everything has to become a thumbnail to be successful.
I want to hear idea 2.
Okay, so the Gumshoe is idea 1, and it's a scrap. Again, I've not really developed it at all. This other one came out through some role play that I had with my boss the other day. So there's this homeless guy outside of our office. I mean, he's not homeless, but he's like a local dude. It's kind of a downtown Main Street stretch that we work off of.
Yeah.
And he's this old guy, and we call him Pork Rind. We call him Pork Rind.
Okay.
Because his face is so burnt up and wrinkly. Like he's definitely lived a rough life. And he's kind of thorny. So we don't mind kind of, you know, dunking him on a little bit. But we call him Mr. Mayor Pork Rind. And for whatever reason, we had this kind of improv going, and I don't know how this came out. I'm pretty sure my boss said it. But the line was like, somebody finds Pork Rind and he's this old guy and he's on the street or whatever. They come up to him real quick and they say, oh, you know, they say what they think his name is. He's like, that's not me. And he's like, no, you were a god. You gave up your immortality. I remember you. And the guy is just like, you know, just saying, so insistent that this like crotchety old man that folds pizza boxes at the pizzeria for $1 is a god. And so that line was really funny to me.
I really like that. Actually, it's really funny. But like immediately both of these characters are hilarious to me because is the guy named Pork Rind?
He can be. I mean, like, is his actual name,
or this is like nickname or street name or something?
Yeah, it's a street name. Yeah.
I like both of these, but I'm really captivated by this dude on the street. If you want,
we can do Gumshoe next episode if you want.
Yeah,
like, you know.
Let's save Gumshoe. I'm gonna write down Gumshoe because I wanna come back to him. But I want to explore. It's not even the guy on the street that's funny to me. It's the adamant like this other dude who's like our sidekick character. He's like, no, because like that's such a wild thing to say. Regardless, like whether or not, is it true? And
Yeah, that's very makes a difference.
Spoilers, y'all. I want it to be. I want it to be.
Oh yeah,
true.
this is very much a Tommy Antonucci idea. I feel like you do really like your kind of godlike beings who are in disguise or whatever, or like. Yeah, you just like the character. I'm all for that. Like Superman, I love Superman. We've talked about that a good bit on this podcast before. Like, you know, it's such an interesting dynamic. It's way more interesting than somebody who's like super weak. You know, like Spider-Man, he sucks. No, take that out of context, please. But no, I had a little bit more written that I think you would find interesting. Okay. So the guy tells him like, you gave up your immortality for a woman. You know, you had to be mortal to be with a mortal woman. And it turned out that that she was a man. So he had no idea that he was getting catfished. So the god.
Oh, like he's like online. Or something
yeah.
That. It's just like, that's so funny.
Yeah. So
he's
this god
like,
got catfished.
I was on the forums. They're like, you didn't wait to meet her before you gave up your power?
I thought my omniscience was enough. No, he's not omniscient. I think it's little g God, obviously. Like, you know, we're talking.
I think he was like a Zeus-esque.
Yes, god. like a Hermes type character.
Thor
is
Marvel.
a good one. Yeah.
I like that. I think it's funny whether you go that direction that he got catfished. That's very funny. Or he. Or it's just like the end of Hercules, but then like she's awful, and then like she leaves him, and he's like, I gave up everything for this. Yeah. That's funny to me as well. I like the idea that he doesn't remember though.
I think that's a whole other like unspoken thing where it's like, well, why did he forget? Like, what happened? And maybe it's related to the fact that he gave up his immortality. Like, you know, for whatever reason, I guess this character that comes up to him, you know, remembers all of this. Maybe he too was a god, or maybe he is a god. I don't know.
Yeah. So let's establish. I think our protagonist at the beginning is. Do we want to call him Pork Rind? Like he's just like, hey guys, I'm down. I'm Pork Rind, and
he can have like you know, his name could be John Doe or whatever, but he's like, but folks call me Pork Rind.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting if he doesn't remember his backstory, that he would just go with a nickname.
Yeah,
you know?
That's true. People
call me Pork Rind, and we just see him. I think we're pretty quick. Like we see him. He's just kind of this guy, hard on his luck.
Drinks a lot.
Drinks a lot. He's on the side of the road, and one day this guy, tucked in shirt, tie, khakis, just very, very peppy guy. He's like, wait a second, I know you. And
I was your number one worshiper.
Well, do we want it to be like a god like that, or do we want it to be?
I don't know. I think that is funny though, where he's just like this normal guy who's like, I was a priest in the order of Pork Rind.
Because I was thinking, like he could be like we could make this world that there are deities or something.
I think that
or we could make it like he's Dr. Manhattan. So when he says you were a god, he's not saying like people worshipped you. He's saying you had the power of
That's
God,
true.
Basically.
That's true. Yeah.
You were like a superhero. Do you not remember any of this?
Yeah, I guess that's true. It's in another way. It is like I was Superman and now I don't remember.
Yeah.
You know, Superman with amnesia, which I think is how Quentin Tarantino described Unbreakable, which I love. Unbreakable is a fantastic movie, often overshadowed by other Shyamalan productions. But whether he's a god or not, I think he could be like eldritchy, you know, like Lovecraftian type being, you know, like a Cthulhu god, you know, a deep ocean god. And it's like, we don't even need to get into the backstory necessarily. That's why I like that he is actually being worshipped by somebody, like some guy, and he's like, I gave it up. And that guy's like, you're kind of playing with this idea that guy's like a tattooed guy, but he's like all cleaned up now, and he's like, he was part of AA, you know, and he's like, it's a eldritch god worshiping.
The god guy or the
guy that recognizes him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the guy that recognizes him is like, you're Cthulhu. You were Cthulhu. And he's just like, no, I don't know what you're talking about, man.
It's funny that he would recognize him like he's
somehow
like,
in his human form, you know?
Yeah, he's like looks up on his phone like an image of like Cthulhu, and he's just like, oh no, I see it.
I think Cthulhu is a good we can call him that for now, like his god name or whatever. It's not utterable by human mouths, I think is the workaround, but that he was part of, and maybe the guy that recognizes him, let's call him Rick. So Rick, which I just pulled hardcore from the Hulk. So Rick Jones is the guy that like Bruce Banner saves in the original Hulk comics from getting hit by the gamma rays, and Bruce Banner gets hit instead. But he's a great sidekick, like an amazing sidekick character for the run of the Hulk series. But so Rick shows up, and I like the idea that Rick again is like tatted up, but he's like cleaned up though. He's like clearly looks like a guy who had a rough life, but then cleaned up. But he's also like in his 30s or maybe 40s at the latest. And he walks up to poor Rind. And there's just something that about him, an aura maybe that he recognizes. Or maybe he, I don't know, like does something that he recognizes as being
I think we could also like, he has this like feeling and he like looks at him. And then he maybe even like gives the guy change or something as he's passing, and then he like pauses, like his hand hits that guy's hand, and he like pauses, and he's like, wait. I think we're definitely in an absurdist territory, so I think we can have absurd plot points.
Totally.
I like the idea where he's like, it couldn't be, and he like reaches inside his collar, and he has like this like artifact compass, and it's like pointing right to him, and he's like, oh, Cthulhu. Which I feel like we could come up with. Like he has like he cleaned himself up, but he's like I wear this to remember the old days, and then it's like a artifact that points the way. Like it didn't work.
I like the idea that it's a tattoo. And not that the tattoo would move or anything, but that it
like glows,
would glow or hurt or something, where he's just like, whoa. And it's like a Cthulian language word or whatever, an eldritch word. That way, because I like the idea, and just bear with me here, that like Rick is actually like a pastor now. Like he's just like completely cleaned up his life, and so he's just like, I never thought to get it removed because I thought that it made me, whatever.
Yeah, I don't. The only hesitancy with him being a pastor is I want him to be invested in this Cthulhu guy, and I don't want him to abandon his like real faith toward Cthulhu.
That's true.
I think he can just like have his act together.
Yeah, maybe he runs a soup kitchen or something like that. Like I think.
Yeah, he's helping people.
Rick is coded to be like an ex-con, basically. So like, he runs a support group, he runs an AA group, like a therapy group for convicts, like people who have worshipped eldritch gods that have gone away. And so that's funny. Like that in and of itself is funny. And so, but he finds one, and he's like, oh, it's you. But maybe I was going to say that Rick is actually like centuries old, that he actually is.
He's like a demigod.
Yeah, or like was imparted with some
He's
level.
Like, I'm your son.
Yeah. Born of a human woman. But no, the idea that he, would have been a high priest, and it wouldn't have been weird if it was like back in the 1600s or something, that he was part of some cult. But the thing is, no, I don't like that. Which we don't say very often on StoryFellas, of just like,
doubling back on it.
Just like, I don't like that we're moving in a different direction.
No, I think if we want, because I'm picturing Rick as this enthusiastic guy, like that.
Yeah.
This pork rind is resistant. If that's the case, you need Rick to be about it. And I don't think we can have him helping other people and doubling back so easily. Like, or the story could be like, hey, he finds him and is trying to help him. But I do think it's funnier if he's just like, he's a guy that worshipped this weird god thing, and then the god thing disappeared, and then he like reluctantly, like he's like, all right, I guess I'll be normal. But he's just like waiting. He's like the GameStop traders that are just waiting for Roaring Kitty to like speak the word, and then when he finds out, he's like doubles back. He's like, oh, I'm in. He's like, no, he's like, I'm gonna quit he's like, he calls, he's like, I quit. And then like that's what I think Rick can bring a lot of comedy if that's who he is.
Oh, I think he's definitely like enthusiastic puppy dog type guy.
Yeah.
Kind of
I really-
dumb.
I
you
like
know?
the scene. He's like, how did you? And we'll get in a second. I think we have to establish this scene if like, does Pork Rind remember or something? He's like, I felt it in my tattoo. So he's like, what? And he like pulls his shirt
Yeah,
over his
yeah.
head, and his back is just this
Covered.
giant tentacled monster, and it's like pulsating. He's like, it's you, and he like trips and he like falls. He's like, his bare back is like on Pork Rind's face. He's like, oh. But Rick is the comedy engine of this. He's the one who's going to get him into trouble and
Yeah.
stuff. I think the next piece we need to decide is Pork Rind aware of these things, or is he need to have his memory jogged?
He definitely, I think, needs to have his memory jogged. I think, he's definitely foggy, having lived such a rough life, basically. And I do think it's because he got his heart broken. That it's like, welcome to being human, buddy. Like,
Yeah, the last thing he remembers is, or maybe that's like he vaguely remembers his heart being broken. He's like, that's the last thing I remember. It sounds like this very like sweet thing. And then it's like, no, the text. It's like you fell for this woman, but when you met her, it turned out it was just some dude who was like,
yeah, exactly.
sending you
Catfish
messages.
I love that. It's like some Indian guy. He's just like what? No, he fell for like the most classic, obvious.
Yeah, and it's like it's like in the old days. Like it was like catfishing, but it was just through letters. Like it was just old school penmanship.
That could totally work. Yeah.
And like I like the idea that he thought he had this big backstory, and then the guy's like, no, the legend has it is that this woman was sending you letters in your God form, and you surrendered up all your power to be with her, and then when you went, it was just some guy who's just like sending you like letters, so that he was like pretending to be a woman.
I love that. I actually think it's funnier if it's the internet though. Like
it is funnier
because it's a little bit more relatable.
You get that again, a Smiling Friends reference where Charlie goes and he meets the devil, and the devil's just gaming on a giant computer, like a giant divine being, like playing like on a laptop is really funny. He's like, oh.
I do think then once Pork Rind is like awakened to his divinity, well, one, we have to like play with the idea, is it even real? I think from Rick's perspective, do we show that, like, again, that's why I'm getting away from the tattoos like throbbing or whatever. It's like just an internal thing that Rick has. Of course, he's got a tattoo and he can say it's burning, but Pork Rind can't really verify that in any way. Like what happens when you find a total drunkard, homeless guy or almost homeless guy, and you tell him that he was a god, and it's like you let that comedy ensue. You just unleash him, and the fact that he was like an evil god, I think is really funny. It almost has like a Megamind type thing to it.
Yeah, I'm generating with some AI some names, some fake names, because I kind of don't want him to be Cthulhu. I want him to be like
I agree. Yeah.
There's Xylos, XYLOS is kind of cool.
Okay.
There's Dagor. There's Azath, Yig.
I like Yig.
Yig.
Yeah.
It says short and abrupt, like a sudden chilling realization. YIGG, which is I'm gonna write that down. I like Yig as well, and it's like you were Yig, you're Yig. It's like also kind of funny because it doesn't sound as scary as like a Cthulhu.
Yeah, it sounds like a smaller god.
Yeah.
Like it sounds dwarfish in some
He's
way.
like, I was a god. Well, like not like one of the biggest ones. But like
you weren't
pretty cool.
You weren't God, but you were a god. And he's like, I had a great time worshiping you. It was we had some wild times. And he's like this big tentacle being.
Yeah, I think so he's like a big octopus or something. So are we saying this is kind of recently? Like Rick doesn't have a abnormally long life. He's just like
I think
within
so.
his
Yeah,
lifetime.
Like it's maybe been 10 years.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
you can play with the idea that Pork Rind aged a lot faster. Because when he came in and he probably had a body, or maybe was given a body by a follower or whatever, and that's who he's occupying currently.
It also feels like if he became man, like him just being this kind of like gray beard, like he's already like I don't know, like a not Santa Claus, but like like already kind of wise, mature man. And then he gets catfished. I think when he does that, so I'm trying to fill all the logic holes. I know this is an absurd thing, but in this world where he was a god, is he either like so obscure that normal people don't know about him, and that's why no one really
Yeah, I
cares?
think he was worshipped
Or-
in the shadows. You know,
Okay,
it was a cult.
I was gonna say, did he
basically.
like force memory wipes on people or something? But I think that
No,
works. It's
there's
just
something
like
to
a
be said
very
about-
small following. He's like, there were like 20 of us. There were 20
Yeah,
of us that
yeah. He was an
worshipped
ancient, like back in the day. Maybe he had like hundreds, but
Mm-hmm.
the cult just dwindled and dwindled and dwindled, and that was another reason why he gave up his immortality, because he's like, I just looked into the future and I saw nobody worshiping me anyway. I mean, I don't know when he says that in the case of the story, but we need another love interest for Yig / Pork Rind.
Yeah, I'm gonna blast through some story circle real quick because I think we established the use. We established Pork Rind really quickly. We find Rick. Rick is enthusiastic, still follower, kind of like the last fan. Like it's like I'm your biggest fan. You're like the only fan. And he's like telling him this thing. He's like, come on, come to McDonald's with me. And he like buys him a meal.
Yeah,
and he's like talking
on
about
mute. The story just looks like an enthusiastic, like ex-con, basically,
Yeah.
charismatic ex-con kind of guy, taking care of a homeless guy. Like that, the comedy should be based on those types of things, because then the God stuff makes it funny, like makes it ridiculous. So like him buying him a meal like at McDonald's or whatever, him taking him home, convincing him, like, you know, him helping him reconcile with his family or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's basically cleaning this guy up, and then we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I like it. I think he's like, I recognize you. I know you. And it kind of freaks Pork Rind out. And then he looks around. He's like, can I buy you a meal? Do you want? And they go to like a fast food place, and he's just wolfing down burgers.
He's not even talking, and Rick is just like studying
and,
him.
Rick's just like, he's like, so you think you know me? And he's like, yeah. And he like calls him Yig. He's like, Yig. And he's like, you're a god. And then he's like, and then he like freezes like mid-bite. He's like, what? And
that's
and
good.
Like, yeah, and then I think that's the need. So like their independent needs are like Rick wants to, I think, awaken his being. And I think it's interesting because the audience does not know, and we're still figuring it out. Is this real? Like, is he a god, or is he like, is Rick kind of crazy? Because it sounds crazy, and Pork Rind thinks it's crazy.
I have a scene idea.
Cool. Before that, the need is that they're trying to figure out the truth behind this. The crossing of the threshold, I think, is your like Mr. Incredible training scene where like we have these montages of Rick. He's like, we're gonna train you, and then you'll come back. He's like, you were like a water god, and he's like throwing him in the ocean and stuff like that. Do you remember? But I want to hear your scene.
Oh yeah, so I think this might be at the end of that, like near the end of the movie anyway, where it is just like clear Yig is not coming out of Pork Rind. There's just nothing in him. And maybe he's like, there's nothing in me divine. Like there's no spark, there's no nothing. You know, and Rick pulls out a gun and it's just like so desperate. And he's like, I will release you. I will release Yig from this mortal shell, you pathetic old man. And you know, they argue then at that point where it's like, no, like, and he's like, why are you holding on so tight to this? Like clearly everything about you wants to shed this mortal coil. Like you want away from this life. And so there's like, that's such an intense scene. You know, leave it to me to drop the gravity, you know, and like get to the
it
core.
turns it to dark comedy if we're going to make Rick this desperate, you know? Like I think the dial of Rick, how obsessed he is, influences how dark this movie becomes.
Totally. And I do think he gets upset. I think I could see Rick crying a little bit, and he's just like, you know, you were my hero, which is not, you know, necessarily a good thing. But it's like in a weird way with Rick's arc has to be somewhat like, hey, you were a crack addict who like beat it, like you got done with it, and then you found crack embodied, you know, and you're like, oh man, I've been looking everywhere for you. And then he's disappointed because he's like, I'm starting to think that you aren't really him. And maybe you see that kind of, that Rick as a cult member, an ex-cult member, is still pretty shattered. And he's just like, you know, I don't really care if you're a god anymore now. Like I kind of, you know, this idea that it's going to be satisfying just to kill him anyway, like as a representative of Yig and the damage that he did to him. You know, like, so it's almost like, a reconciliation story between the two of them. That like,
Yeah,
it's a dad figure that kind of abandoned his son.
yeah, and I think that's interesting. That leads more into the like maybe it's not him, or maybe it was him, and maybe we don't answer that. Whether it's like no, he was this, but he just is so fully gone and changed, or it's Rick's kind of crazy, and he just never was this guy. I think the gun scene could happen like towards the end, maybe not the final scene because that's very.
Yeah, that's the climax, not the.
That's a Unbreakable scene too, where the kid's like,
True.
I'll shoot you, Dad, and then you'll know that you're invincible."
That's
and
so
he's like,
true.
Don't
Maybe
shoot me.
We could find our own little way.
No, we can. Well, like he's like, I don't know. That scene doesn't belong just to that movie.
No,
I
mean
it works.
It
shows his
in,
desperation because the kid does it very happily, thinking like, "Oh, I'm going to show you." Where I think the scene we're painting is in desperation. He's like, this has to work.
The kid is desperate too, where he's just like, you need to stop moping around, basically. And there's actually a scene from, I can't remember the name of the movie, but it's about the death of the actor who played Superman in like the 30s and the 40s. And Ben Affleck plays him. And there's a little kid who comes up with a real gun and is like, I'm going to shoot you. And like, apparently that really happened.
Oh, really?
And he was just like, no, kid, like if you shoot me, it'll ricochet and hurt somebody. You don't want to to do that. So we can find a different way. I mean, they can be driving kind of a la Fight Club.
Yeah.
And Rick can just be like, I'm not going to take the wheel anymore. Cause I think Rick is also a little suicidal, like he has that, like, I don't want to, my purpose in life is tied up in this.
I think, yeah, I just don't want to end it on the sour note. Like I feel like where it's leading.
Oh, no, I'm not saying this is the ending. This is the climax. So this is the end of their arc. Like their arc breaks. It changes after this. Like whatever happens, whatever they do get into a car accident. They wake up, and it actually Yig came out and saved Rick. Like and then like marches off into the swamp or whatever. Like you'd have an actual ending, like a denouement. A descending action, with like Rick in the hospital. Whatever. Like. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't be the end, like right before the credits, if that's what you mean. I don't know if that's what you.
Oh yeah, yeah. I didn't know if you were ending with him shooting the guy.
No.
Because I like the ending. Like I think the thing that's interesting about this movie is Rick shows up into this homeless guy's life and basically starts helping him and taking care of him. And it's like, oh, he's helping him, but really, what the story is about is this guy, is Pork Rind, helping Rick, because Rick is the one that is, in a sense, more enslaved to things than Pork Rind. So it's like he helps him, but then Pork Rind's doing more of the helping in the long run. And he's trying to, I don't know, get this guy free. Like get this guy. It's like, hey, you. And there's some line in there where he's just like, where he's comparing. He's like, oh, like you're the one who's trapped by society or whatever like that. I think that's interesting, and I don't know if I want him to be the actual god or not. If he does, I want him to like leave a letter or something. He's like, hey, turns out you were right, but that doesn't mean I was wrong. Like you need to like. I like that line actually. Like he's like, turns out you were right. Like maybe we don't even see the monster. We get hints of it, or like the side of a building's blown up, like and like there's giant footprints that lead into the swamp. But then there was a letter left behind. He's like, hey, turns out you were right, but I wasn't wrong. Don't come looking for me. You've got a better life to pursue or something like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I do think that is the major dramatic point of like, is he actually this god Yig? Yeah. And we can like go to a museum that has like artifacts of Yig. I think that would be cool. And they like maybe straight up Rick steals an amulet from the museum or whatever. It's like Rick is starting to, clearly he had like the cleaned up ex-con thing going. And like we see that he's got like a girlfriend who has a daughter, he has this whole life where it's like, yeah, man, I used to be like, kind of a bad guy. And with Yig, which is like, you would think he would have kind of rounded the corner on that, and he wouldn't be falling so enthusiastically if it was that serious. So maybe he doesn't have like attachments like the little girl.
Yeah, I feel like it's like
he can have a girlfriend, but
like he's clearly not healthy yet, you know? And I think there's like even like maybe he has a friend or something or someone who he met in. I think that's what we introduce a girl that was like, oh, and then Pork Rind is. It's funny still calling him Pork Rind.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, who's that? And she's like, oh, I met her in a recovery class or something like that. Whether she was an attendant or she was one of the like moderators of it.
Mm.
And she's like really kind to him and stuff. And that's kind of putting in Pork Rind's head. He's like, okay, I see like I see the two roads for Rick. Like I can see there's a better road, and then there's this road that he's pursuing, and so he's trying to get him.
That's good. I like that. I do think Rick, they go to the museum. This is kind of a little bit of the just like what do they do type stuff. They go to the museum, and they get an artifact, and they like test it out or whatever, and it doesn't work or kind of backfires or whatever. Or Pork Rind, throws it away. Right into traffic and it gets run over or something. I don't know. But then he takes him to the old high priest. Like Rick takes him to his old boss, basically, the high priest of Yig. And that might be like the scene right before the driving back in the storm or whatever. And he, lets himself get hit by a semi truck to try and get Yig to save him. And I don't know. I think that could be really cool. Like you get like a bigger actor who's just in it just to be the high priest, and it's like a lot of makeup. They're kind of ugly.
I really like the high priest is like a janitor somewhere or something.
Oh, that's
like
cool.
That. Like,
yeah, I like that.
He's like, hey, remember me? And the guy's like, oh, stop. Like we're over this.
Like he recognizes Rick, and he's just like, move on, Rick. Like, yes, I was the high priest, but
he's like, I found Yig.
I do like that. It's at like a high school.
Yeah, it's like after hours, like all the lights are on.
He's just unplunging a toilet. He's like in the boys' locker room, and they find him, and he's just like, "The son of a."
What are they eating?
yeah, exactly. School lunches. But
I was a high priest for this god of destruction, and I haven't seen something as vile as this.
yeah. He's just like, I spent years, looking into the heart of darkness, and it was nothing compared to this. Just a big swirling dump into the boys' locker room. But then I do like the idea that the high priest confirms that that's Yig, and he's just like, that is Yig. That is his. That is, I remember it. And he's just like, you need to get him out of here. Like, he's not God. He's not a god anymore.
Okay. I like that he recognizes him, but does not like fall into the whole worshiping him again like Rick does. He's just like, it's over, man. Yeah, that's
I think
him,
the janitor guy he could have a family. The high priest is just like completely moved on.
Yeah.
It actually would be really funny if it was the principal of the high school.
That's funny.
And he's just like, you think it's going to be the janitor, like a disgusting janitor guy. Although I do like the plunging scene. I think that's very funny. But like somebody trying to, like they come and visit him like during school hours and it's like do lunch. It's like, I thought I could just show up for lunch. It's like, it doesn't work like that. And he's like walking around the cafeteria and it's like, we know you have latent psychic abilities. We know, whatever. And they can even talk about that. Like, and we could imply that the principal has like, telekinesis or something, like he could get mad and move something. I guess that kind of, is it like, is any of this stuff real or is Yig real? Like we could play with that. Cause like it kind of undercuts it a little bit to like, oh, hey, you see these psychic people, then okay, these gods have to exist.
Yeah, I don't want to see any supernatural until the very end potentially, just because I think that's the interesting part. I think the beats we could follow, I like they go to the school, and because that feels like a post midway, like they're doing all these homebrew remedies of like, this will help you remember. I just picture like Hot Rod where he's like holding him under a pool. He's like, you can breathe underwater. And then we have a lot of bond. Like we have bonding in spite of all the absurdity. Like we do have this kind of estranged father to Because that's kind of what it is. He is, in a way, kind of an estranged father to Rick, like this guy who abandoned him.
And then he releases
And
him at the end from his service, basically.
yes,
You
and
know, he's
then
like, I release you. And I don't know, maybe Pork Rind dies. And at the funeral, you know, we could imply that there's like he becomes the god again.
yeah, I think we could go the route of they go to the school. That's the last ditch effort. They leave the school.
They are in the car
And
and they crash.
well, I was gonna say with that could be like between the crash and the gun, or the thing could be the gun, where maybe he pulls off to the side of the road and then he has like a gun in his and he's just this is like the desperate. He's like, you have to remember, and he's like, Rick, I'm not the guy that you think I am. Like I'm sorry, and like Rick is desperate. There's this kind of tension moment, and then Rick kind of breaks down and is sad and like puts the gun down. And it's just kind of that's like the falling out of like realizing like what's wrong with me. Like even if this stuff is true, like what is wrong with me? Like why am I becoming this? And that's kind of like the turning point for Rick a little bit. And then we could still have the car crash where maybe they're driving home from there and it's like an accident,
Okay,
you know?
sure. Yeah.
And it's an accident and Rick wakes up and comes to, and like he's perfectly fine. But then like the car's like clearly hit, or I don't know. There's like a couple ways you could do it where his car's like not very damaged, but like the semi truck has just like a giant like
Totally, yeah.
dent in it, or there's like a hole blown out of the side, like it's like something blew outward from the car, but like his side of the car is completely fine. And then you see like this destruction that leads off into the woods. And if you were going to do that, there's no time for a letter. So maybe there is that heartfelt. He said, even if this is real, Rick, I think you should move on. Like, I think you should
Yeah.
go and like, don't chase this guy. Don't chase you anymore. Like I can see a better life for you if you turn a different direction. But I like the idea. I think it's kind of fun to like tease it. We never see it, but like he was the god. He runs off, and then Rick is like, "Oh, I was right." But then in knowing he's right, he still takes his advice. And
Yeah. I think there's a
better
line
way.
in there that started to cook in my head where it's like, you know, some gods aren't worth worshiping. I think that's really interesting where it's like, whether I am or I'm not, I don't know it. Either way, like, you know, was I any good to you? Yeah, like was worshiping this Yig character any good to you? I don't know. I think that's an interesting commentary on those types of things. And yeah, I think you know the truck gets totally obliterated, or they get hit by a semi truck. And you could even have a thing like where he's in the hospital and he's like, "What about Pork Rind?" Like, Pork Rind? What are you talking about? And he's like, "The old man that was with me." He's like, "There wasn't an old man in the car."
Yeah.
And then you kind of, I hate to be like, oh man, it was all fake. It wasn't. But it's like, you know, there wasn't a sign of an old man. I don't know.
Oh, like, yeah. And I feel like you could always tack on something where we have a flash forward and he's maybe dating the girl that, and things are going well. And maybe he even imply that he has bought a ring or something like that. And then they're like a letter slips under his doors or he gets something in the mail or something. I think that's really cool.
So yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, if he gets a letter and he's like, "Hey, I've been, I don't want it to feel too on the nose, but this letter that's basically saying like, hey, been keeping an eye on you. I'm very proud of you and the direction you're going. Very like as proud as a dad could be or something like that." But then it's signed Pork Rind. It's not signed Yig. It's like signed Pork Rind.
Confusing. I like this.
But it's like, I don't know, like it's funny because as Yig, he was not a good father in a sense to Rick. But as Pork Rind, he learned to be a good father to Rick.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, he could talk about that, you know, again, where it's like, whatever I was to you in the past,
Yeah.
like what we have now is actually, it's been great.
Yes.
To be able to like, you taught me to pick myself up, and to have dignity for myself and whatnot. I think that's, you can go there. I do think, that same thing, that same beat, I thought of a different approach to the same beat. So the whole time, Pork Rind likes to smoke. And every once in a while, Rick will smoke. Like they're just smoking cigarettes. Or maybe he's like, you should vape. He's like, I don't want to vape. And he's just like, buy me a pack of Reds, buy me a pack of Reds. And so he just like has a pack of Reds that was in the car with him. And Pork Rind was smoking those throughout the film, basically. Yeah. And Rick would sit there and there'd be like nice beats where you just like have the two of them sitting. I imagine like a wide shot and they're both kind of like just sitting together. And maybe they're at like a pier, like a Coney Island type thing.
Yeah.
And at the end, Rick is walking with like a boot on or whatever, like signifying that he's recovering from the accident, a cast or something. And he decides to light up a smoke on the pier and he's just, whatever. And he takes a couple puffs. He pulls out the pack, and it's Pork Rind's pack. He takes a couple puffs and he flicks the cigarette. He's not going to smoke the whole thing. He just flicks it into the ocean. And then it like, it flicks back at him, like he sits out there and he's talking to his girlfriend or whatever for a minute. And then she's like, I'm going to go get us some popcorn.
Yeah.
And then it like flicks back. I don't know. I think that's kind of a...
I like that. You could go even further if you wanted and him like appear on the pier, like as Pork Rind.
Oh, sure.
Like human form and like have one last conversation.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey man, you were right. You were right. And maybe that's where that line I said, he's like, you were right, but I was also right. You've got a better thing going here
and than
you ever had with me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't want you coming after me. And yeah, like have that phrasing of like, hey, I was not good. Like what we have now is good. And he's like, will I see you again? But I think this is also a goodbye. This is not like, I'm going to come visit for Christmas. Like,
yeah.
He's like, no, I'm going to go. The world doesn't need any more Yig. So I'm going to just go off and disappear.
Yeah. He's got his own baggage he's got to deal with. You know?
Yeah. You've helped me. It's like a continuation of them keep helping each other. He's like, you've helped me see things and I've got to figure out what's next for me. What's next for Pork Rind? Like kind of implying he's going to just go be a guy at this point. He's not going to try to be some small god.
I like that. I think one of the themes I like the most in this is that there are some gods that aren't worth worshiping.
Yeah.
And that's basically what Yig gets to is like, I've always been a man, in a lot of ways, like I'm no better than a man.
Yeah.
He could even like, there's that connection where, the right, left of the screen where you see Rick is like looking back to his girlfriend and then looking over to Yig or Pork Rind.
Yeah.
And he's like, humans, we're not worth worshiping, and I'm no better than a human. In a lot of ways, I'm a lot worse. I'm a lot worse than you could, you could do a lot worse, or you can't do a lot worse than old Yig here. And so I don't know. I think that's basically part of his send-off speech, which just implies, because I don't want to hot swap like, oh, you could go worship your girlfriend now. Because that's like, I want to kind of avoid that and just punt at like, hey, the state of the human heart is to worship things. And like what you worship determines like how your life actually will play out. And I think that's a really interesting theme that I've not seen a lot of, that this type of story, it's fun and it's funny, but it still hits that like really profound philosophical, theological note. That's an observation that lots of smarter people than myself have made. And I think it doesn't feel hacky to like put it in there.
Yeah. No, I like it. I like the story a lot. I think it is funny and wacky, and it feels like an A24 like indie character driven thing, because we don't see the monster. It's really just a couple guys doing some absurd stuff and trying to get to know each other. It's got that. I kind of also was like, oh, Willem Dafoe could maybe be a fun Pork Rind.
Oh, for sure. That's a great casting. Yeah.
Yeah. It could be. And just put Robert Pattinson.
I'd put him in a fat suit, I think. Oh, yeah. Robert Pattinson as Rick.
Just do the lighthouse, but instead it's this.
That's funny because he is kind of like a sea god in The Lighthouse. Willem Dafoe. It's like not really. It's kind of implied, but it's, he's like Neptune.
We would be way clearer with our themes and stuff
yeah.
Movie.
You don't worship me, boy.
But I like this a lot. I think it's got some really powerful themes, and it's a fun story that's funny, but really about kind of a father-son dynamic and them helping each other out of their rough pasts and finding something better, which I like a lot.
Yeah.
And I like the lines that some gods aren't worth worshiping. I like also, I've always been a man. Like the realization of like, I was not, like, it was wrong to even call me a god back in the day. Cause like,
that's a good double line because it doesn't mean that he wasn't. It just means that he had man-like qualities that made him not worth worshiping.
Yep.
Which is really, like part and parcel of the film. Of like, okay, is he actually? I don't know, but like, it's all in there for interpretation if you really want it. But yeah, so I like that. Some gods aren't worth worshiping, or like in terms of our lines. But what's our title?
Title. I had a couple thoughts for rough titles or directions I want to go because I'm trying to think of like an indie film kind of title.
Yeah. Yig would be probably the easiest thing.
Yig is easy, but it almost feels too easy, and it feels like not indie enough. Like I was thinking of something, the gods brought low, or something like that, or something that's kind of like a sentence.
Oh, for sure.
When we were gods, or something like that.
Yeah. I am not a god. Is an interesting one as well. In that same kind of vein where it's like it's a sentence.
If you want comedy, Ex God is really funny. Like like used to be. But you know what I'm saying? I think Yig is a good placeholder. Let's put the pin in that. But do you see the direction I'm trying to go?
For sure, yeah. And I think we could probably workshop something. I know even those lines that we thought of at the end. About worship and like
the last worshiper,
something like that. I don't like titles with last in them. It's like a weird pet peeve of mine. Just because it's like, it seems like the cheapest form of like, oh, this matters. It's like, oh, this is the last samurai. So
it's the last one.
You better really care about the last samurai. But yeah, the sentence thing, would you want it from Rick's perspective or do you want it from Yig's perspective? I think that might help.
I feel like the story is through Rick's perspective, so it probably needs to be through Rick's perspective.
That's true. We end with him, so he is kind of like our touch point. Like
the killing of the sacred deer, like a big mouthful title. Where you're just like, whoa, that's a mouthful. That's kind of.
I think the resurrection of Yig could be kind of interesting, or the resurrection of Pork Rind,
or. Pork Rind is funny. Yig's resurrection, just like clean it up. We could
that is a cleaner version of it. I think whatever Rick's name is, so whatever his last name is, it'd be like the resurrection of Rick, blah blah blah, which I think could work because it is his redemption, basically. He thought he was. He thought he had broken his addiction. It's a weird drug addict movie too, so you can kind of pull on that.
Oh, I've got one. I don't know if it works, but it does make me laugh. Praying to Pork Rind.
Oh, I thought you were going to say addicted to Yig.
Addicted to Yig is also funny.
But yeah, praying to Pork Rind.
That's like
no, I got it. It's prayers for Pork Rind.
Prayer. Oh, I like it. I like that a lot. We got there. Prayers. Is Pork Rind just one word, like PORKRIND? I think the snack food is 2 words, but I think the nickname is 1 word.
Actually, I don't know. No, it's 2 words.
Well, I feel like there's like, if you look Pork Rind, like there's characters, like cartoon characters named Pork Rind back in the day.
Yeah, that's
Pork Rind.
from Cuphead actually has a character named Pork Rind, all one word, but it's 2 words. Like Wikipedia has it open here. It's a culinary term for the skin of a pig.
So you want to do it 2 words?
Yeah.
Prayers for Pork Rind.
Prayers for Pork Rind. I like that a lot. That's funny.
That's a powerful title, man.
You were a god. I can see the trailer. You were a god. I prayed to you like at least once a day.
Like if not, sometimes every other day. Like
yeah.
Prayers for Pork Rind. Yeah, I can picture the A24.
Yes.
Yeah, like just the thing. Like he's like, you got any change? She's like, I remember. You want to have lunch with me? And he's like, you were a god.
Yeah, like, and he's like what? Eating a sandwich. Just,
Yeah. Willem Dafoe's like, what? I like that.
While he's eating like a Philly cheesesteak or something, like something really messy and gross, and he just looks up. And he's like, that's it. You were a god.
And then, I can already picture the trailer. We have to do tests to get your memory back, and
we have to awaken you.
Wacky. Yeah, we have to awaken you. How are you going to do that? They're like standing on the pier, and he just shoves. Yeah, he just slaps him. Did that work? He's like, and they're just like fighting in the parking lot.
That's funny. And then he's like, they get arrested or whatever together.
Yeah,
for fighting each other.
Yeah, the cops just have him handcuffed, like leaning against he's like, sorry. He's like, sorry, that didn't work. Sorry.
I think they're like 2 cops are like sitting back and they're like, so this guy thinks this other guy's a god. And then they're just fighting, and he's like, "So you fought him?"
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Well, dude,
great episode.
I think that's great, folks. If you're listening, hopefully you are at this point. If you're listening, we've got links in the show notes to send us messages, or you can comment on YouTube videos. If you think of any other funny scenes that this movie could contain, or any other tidbits, what you thought about this movie, if it made you laugh, what parts made you laugh, let us know. We'd love to hear that stuff. And I think that's our story for the week. So we will catch you guys in the next one.
See ya.
Thank you all for listening to StoryFellas, a part of the Pemmican Studios podcast network. Check out our show notes for bonus material, links, and more. To find out more about our current projects, send us messages, and suggest ideas for the show, go to StoryFellasPodcast.com. If you liked what you heard, share the show with a friend. Word of mouth is the best way to grow this community. Until next time, go make and break those stories.